January 1944. Somewhere in the Pacific jungle, the air hangs heavy with rot and cordite. Sweat runs into eyes already burning from smoke. Insects whine undisturbed by the sound of men dying nearby. Ahead, half buried in earth and tangled roots, a Japanese bunker squats like a scar in the hillside, its firing slit dark, patient, alive. An Allied infantryman stumbles forward through churned mud and shattered ferns. His rifle is raised, his hands shaking from exhaustion more than fear. He squeezes the trigger. Nothing happens. The rifle is empty. From inside the bunker, laughter breaks out, short, sharp, mocking. Japanese soldiers, secure behind timber and packed earth, recognize the sound of helplessness, an unarmed enemy at close range, a man who should already be dead. For a moment, the jungle seems to pause. No gunfire, no shouting, just breath, sweat, and the quiet realization that the rules of the fight have suddenly changed. The soldier does not retreat. He looks down at the ground, and then he reaches for something the enemy never expected him to use. By the opening months of 1944, the war in the Pacific had settled into a brutal rhythm of advance and resistance. After the shock of Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japanese forces had surged across Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific, capturing territory with speed and confidence. But by mid-1942, that momentum had begun to slow. Battles at the Coral Sea and Midway halted further expansion. Guadalcanal proved that Japanese ground forces could be beaten at staggering cost. What followed was not a single front, but a chain of isolated infernos. Islands with no strategic value on a map became killing grounds because they blocked airfields, sea lanes, or supply routes. Jungle, coral, volcanic rock, and monsoon rain replaced roads and open fields. Every advance was measured in yards, not miles. Japanese defensive doctrine adapted quickly. Rather than meeting assaults on beaches or in open terrain, Imperial Japanese Army units learned to disappear into the ground. They carved bunkers into hillsides, reinforced them with timber, steel, and layers of earth, and linked them through trenches and tunnels. These positions were not meant to be held briefly. They were designed to bleed attackers dry. For Allied infantry, American, Australian, British, and colonial forces, this changed the nature of combat entirely. Artillery and naval bombardments often failed to destroy well-camouflaged bunkers. Airstrikes shook the earth but left firing slits intact. When the shelling stopped, the bunkers came alive again. The burden fell on small units, rifle squads, fire teams, individual soldiers carrying everything they needed on their backs. They advanced through terrain that erased visibility, muffled sound, and turned every step into a risk. Japanese defenders waited in silence, disciplined and concealed, allowing attackers to come dangerously close before opening fire. Logistics only compounded the danger. Ammunition ran low in prolonged engagements, weapons jammed in humidity and mud. Rifles designed for open European fields were forced into close-quarters jungle fighting. Resupply was uncertain. Communication broke down under fire. In this environment, survival depended less on doctrine and more on improvisation. Men learned quickly that the battlefield did not care about regulations or pride. It rewarded only those who adapted faster than the enemy. And in the shadow of those bunkers, adaptation often meant using whatever weapon was still capable of firing. The engagement that set the stage for this moment unfolded during one of the grinding Allied advances through Japanese-held territory in the Southwest Pacific. By late 1943 and early 1944, Allied strategy had shifted toward isolating major Japanese strongholds rather than destroying them outright. General Douglas MacArthur's forces pushed along the northern coast of New Guinea, while U.S. Marines and Army units fought across island chains farther east. Each advance forced Japanese garrisons to dig in, knowing relief was unlikely. Japanese units stationed in these regions understood the reality they faced. Cut off from naval support and regular resupply, they conserved ammunition, avoided unnecessary movement, and relied on fixed defensive positions. Bunkers were positioned to overlap fields of fire, covering likely avenues of approach. Some were equipped with heavy machine guns, others with rifles and grenades, all protected by natural terrain enhanced through hours of manual labor. For the attacking infantry, the objective was rarely the destruction of an entire enemy force in a single engagement. It was the seizure of ground, one ridge, one trail, one bunker at a time. Each position neutralized meant safer passage for the units behind them. Failure meant stalling the advance and inviting counterattacks from unseen directions. Small unit assaults on bunkers followed grim patterns. One element provided suppressive fire, while another attempted to flank or approach from dead ground. Flamethrowers, grenades, and satchel charges became essential tools, but they were limited in number and often drew intense fire the moment they were identified. Casualties among assault teams were disproportionately high. Amid this chaos, the line between enemy equipment and friendly equipment blurred. Japanese rifles, particularly the Type 38 and Type 99 Arisaka, were commonly found on battlefields after engagements. Submachine guns, light machine guns, and grenades were scavenged when Allied weapons ran dry or malfunctioned. Though not officially encouraged, the use of captured weapons was a known reality of jungle warfare. Training manuals could not anticipate every situation. Officers and non-commissioned leaders learned to tolerate improvisation when it meant survival. In the Pacific, a functioning weapon, regardless of its origin, was often the difference between advancing and dying in place. It was under these conditions, short on ammunition, pressed against fortified earth, and facing an enemy confident in his defenses, that a single soldier found himself exposed before a bunker, his rifle empty, and the fight far from over. By the time infantry reached a Japanese bunker, the body was already past its limits. Dehydration dulled judgment. Lack of sleep slowed reaction. Fear was constant, but it was no longer sharp. It had become heavy, pressing down with every step forward. Men learned to function inside that weight. They moved because stopping felt worse. In close combat, individuality resurfaced. Doctrine dissolved. Each soldier was alone with his breath, his hands, and whatever he could see through sweat and smoke. When a weapon failed, it was not merely a technical problem, it was a psychological collapse. The sound of an empty chamber carried a finality that words could not match. Japanese bunker defense relied on patience. Fire was withheld until attackers were close enough that retreat became costly. This created moments where attackers were fully exposed, committed, and vulnerable. A stalled assault caused by hesitation, injury, or equipment failure invited immediate lethal fire. At such distances, seconds mattered. A man who froze was dead. A man who moved, even irrationally, sometimes survived. The bunker was not just a position, it was a psychological trap. Japanese defenders often observed their attackers carefully. Mockery was rare, but confidence was common when an enemy showed weakness. A soldier facing an unarmed opponent at close range felt the advantage of preparation, protection, and doctrine. In those moments, defenders believed the outcome was decided. They had seen attackers retreat before. They had watched fear win. But they did not always anticipate what desperation could unlock. In the Pacific, Weapons were judged less by design and more by reliability. Moisture warped wood stocks, fine grit jammed bolts, ammunition corroded in pouches soaked by rain and sweat. The standard-issue rifle, accurate and dependable in theory, could become useless in a single moment. Captured Japanese weapons offered unexpected advantages in close quarters. Arasaka rifles were rugged and often still loaded when abandoned. Japanese light machine guns, though heavier, delivered sustained fire from short range. Grenades were simple, lethal, and plentiful around bunker positions. A weapon on the ground, regardless of origin, represented immediate life. Small unit leadership in jungle warfare often meant knowing when not to interfere. Officers could not see every engagement. Non-commissioned officers learned to trust instinct over orders. If a soldier adapted under fire and succeeded, the result mattered more than the method. This unofficial tolerance saved lives. It allowed initiative to flourish in moments when centralized control was impossible. Using an enemy's weapon crossed no ethical boundary in combat, but it carried a psychological weight. It meant acknowledging vulnerability. It meant survival over symbolism. War stripped choices down to their simplest form: act or disappear. And when action came, it did not announce itself, it erupted. That eruption began at the mouth of the bunker, where mockery turned to shock, and the balance of the fight shifted in an instant. The distance to the bunker is no more than a few yards, close enough to see the rough grain of timber bracing the firing slit, close enough to hear voices inside, confident, unhurried. The empty rifle hangs useless in the soldier's hands, its weight suddenly unfamiliar. He does not look back. Dropping to one knee, he reaches into the churned earth at his feet. The ground is littered with what the fight has already discarded: spent casings, torn webbing, and bodies that no longer move. Among them lies a Japanese rifle, abandoned when its owner fell during the earlier exchange of fire. The bolt is closed, the magazine is heavy. Inside the bunker, movement shifts, the laughter fades, replaced by uncertainty. The opening that moments ago felt secure now frames something different: not retreat, not surrender. The soldier brings the captured weapon up. The stock is shorter than his own, the sights unfamiliar. There is no time to adjust, only time to act. He fires. The first shot cracks inside the bunker, amplified by packed earth and timber. The confined space turns sound into force. Dust erupts from the firing slit. A second shot follows, then a third, each one driving deeper into the position that moments earlier felt untouchable. The Japanese defenders scramble. Doctrine demands discipline, but surprise fractures it. A bunker designed to control the approach now becomes a trap for those inside. And the soldier moves closer, knowing that hesitation would restore the enemy's advantage, and that the next few seconds will decide whether this position holds or falls forever. The soldier closes the final distance in a rush that feels both reckless and inevitable. Each step compresses the world to the width of the bunker opening. There is no flanking maneuver now, no covering fire. The fight has narrowed to a single decision carried forward by momentum. He reaches the firing slit and fires again, angling the barrel downward. Inside, the confined space magnifies chaos. Smoke thickens, splinters tear free from the timber supports. One defender falls back into the shadows, another stumbles over him, their carefully rehearsed fields of fire collapsing into confusion. A grenade, also captured, comes next. The pin pulls free with a dull metallic sound that seems impossibly loud. There is no pause for calculation. The grenade disappears into the darkness.
The explosion is contained, brutal. Earth and wood absorb much of the blast, but the effect inside is decisive. The bunker that moments ago dominated the approach is silenced. When the smoke clears, there is no return fire. Nearby, other Allied soldiers advance cautiously, weapons trained on the opening. They had expected to rush forward to drag a wounded man back or to find a body. Instead, they find a cleared position and a soldier standing in front of it, breathing hard, holding a weapon that does not belong to him. The turning point is not announced by cheers or commands. It arrives quietly, in the sudden absence of resistance. A strong point that pinned the advance is gone. A line that could not be crossed has been crossed. And as the unit moves past the bunker and into the jungle beyond, the weight of what just happened begins to settle, because the fight is not over, and moments like this will decide how far the line can move before nightfall. The immediate effect of the bunker's fall is not celebration, but motion. Orders are passed in low voices, fields of fire reassessed. The unit pushes forward while the opening exists, knowing that hesitation allows the enemy time to recover elsewhere. In jungle warfare, momentum is fragile and precious. The cleared bunker alters the battlefield in measurable ways. What had been a killing zone becomes a passage. Supply carriers move up, wounded or evacuated through ground that minutes earlier was untouchable. The psychological pressure that held the unit in place lifts, replaced by wary focus. Japanese casualties inside the position are confirmed once the area is secured. The defenders fought until the structure that protected them became their confinement. This outcome is neither unusual nor celebrated. It is logged, reported, and absorbed into the daily arithmetic of advance. For the soldiers who witnessed it, the moment lingers, not as legend, but as proof. Proof that fixed defenses, no matter how carefully built, are vulnerable to proximity and surprise. Proof that a single malfunction does not have to end an assault. And proof that the enemy's confidence can become a liability. There is no formal commendation in the immediate aftermath. Combat reports are brief. They note the bunker neutralized by small arms fire and grenade. Names are recorded. Equipment losses are listed. The personal details, the laughter, the empty rifle, the captured weapon, do not appear on paper. But they remain with the men who move forward, aware that the next bunker will be waiting, just as concealed, just as certain of its advantage.
In the days that follow, the engagement fades into the broader operation. The advance continues. Terrain is secured, then contested again. Maps are updated with pencil marks that barely reflect the cost of each adjustment. Higher command measures progress in yards gained and resistance reduced. Yet moments like this shape doctrine quietly. Field reports emphasize the effectiveness of aggressive close assault against fixed positions. Training units back from the front take note of ammunition discipline and the necessity of adaptability. The unofficial lessons, never assume a weapon will function, never ignore what the battlefield provides, are passed down through experience rather than manuals. Japanese defensive strategy does not change overnight, but its limits become clearer. Bunkers remain formidable, but they are no longer seen as invulnerable. Allied forces refine techniques, coordinated fire, flanking under cover, and rapid exploitation once a position is breached. Each cleared bunker reduces the psychological grip of the next. For the individual soldier, the aftermath is quieter and more personal. The adrenaline fades, replaced by exhaustion. The captured weapon is returned, discarded, or carried only until friendly arms can replace it. The memory of laughter from inside the bunker does not disappear. It settles into a deeper understanding of how quickly certainty can collapse under pressure.
No official history will single out this moment. It will exist as one of thousands of similar encounters that collectively eroded Japan's defensive perimeter across the Pacific. But without such moments, advances stalled, campaigns dragged on, casualties mounted. As the war moved forward, shaped by countless unrecorded acts of improvisation, the meaning of this encounter extended beyond the hillside where it occurred, into the way infantry would fight, survive, and adapt until the conflict finally reached its end. War rarely turns on grand speeches or perfectly executed plans. More often, it pivots on moments when systems fail and individuals are forced to choose between paralysis and action. In the Pacific, where distance collapsed and terrain erased certainty, those moments came without warning. The soldier at the bunker did not change the course of the war. He did not alter strategy or redraw borders. What he did was smaller and more enduring. He demonstrated that survival in modern warfare depends on adaptability more than tradition, on awareness more than pride. An empty rifle was not an ending, it was a test. Japanese bunker doctrine was built on discipline and preparation, and for a time it worked. But war is not static. It responds to pressure with fracture. When defenses met unpredictability at point-blank range, even the strongest positions became vulnerable. For those who fought in the jungles and on the islands, these encounters left a permanent mark. They learned that courage was not always loud. Sometimes it was silent, deliberate, and carried out with whatever tool remained at hand. Sometimes it meant picking up an enemy's weapon and stepping forward instead of back. When the fighting ended and the jungle reclaimed its scars, the bunker became just another hollow in the earth. No marker, no inscription, but the lesson endured, passed quietly from one generation of soldiers to the next. Because in war, victory often belongs not to those who mock first, but to those who adapt when everything they relied on falls silent.